Hello, everyone. Welcome to our conversation today. My name is Annabella Rosenberg, and I work for the Climate Action Network International. On behalf of the organizing committee of these public hearings, that is composed of CAN, the Asian People's Movement for Debt and Development, APMDD, the Women and Gender Constituency, and the Youth Constituency at the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. We would like to welcome our experts and all of those joining us online to our event towards BAM, the public hearings on the just transition mechanism. For the past few years, civil society has been engaging very intensively on just transition at global climate conferences as a means to ensure that all aspects of climate action embrace the need for securing rights and justice for workers, indigenous peoples, and communities, and support all countries in their efforts to find pathways for their people's dignity and prosperity. COP30, in that context, constituted a major landmark for advancing justice, equity, and rights through just transition. A decision was taken there outlining key principles that must be taken into account when advancing just transition. On top of that, and critical to civil society demands, it committed to develop for decision in 2026 a just transition mechanism that will make all those principles and aspects be materialized. Our groups outline several demands regarding the mechanism, which we have called the BAM, that now stands for the Belém-Antalya mechanism for just transition. As we prepare for the next round of negotiations, we wanted to hear from experts and practitioners that go well beyond our constituencies to hear their thoughts on how we can make the just transition mechanism work, learning from past experiences and accelerating the good work that is happening on the ground. Instead of holding those conversations privately, we have decided to put them publicly there so that they benefit a much larger audience. In this first session of the hearings, we are really honored to be joined by representatives of the Indonesian Center for Environmental Law, Grita Anindarini, Rabin Daniel Nainggolan, and Azzahrah. What we are going to do is to hear a brief presentation by them, followed by an interactive exchange, and then we are going to close normally at 50 past the hour. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our guests this morning. First, I would like to introduce you to Grita Anindarini, Minda, who's a legal researcher specializing on just transition, energy and mining law, climate change, and environmental administrative law. She's the senior strategist at ICEL, and also the chair of the board of Publish What You Pay Indonesia. She has over a decade of experience, and she has contributed to legal research and regulatory drafting in environmental protection and natural resources governance at international, national, and local levels. Then we also have with us Saffanah Azzahrah, who is a climate and energy policy researcher with expertise on just energy transition, climate diplomacy, and Indonesia's decarbonization pathways. And we also have Rabin Daniel Nainggolan, who's a graduate in a master's in energy and climate law. And during his master's has actually focused on hydrogen development and renewable energy acceleration. And he's currently a researcher at ICEL. I would like to now pass the floor to Ninda, also welcoming with us in the panel Azzahrah from Angry Alliance, also representing the Demand Climate Justice campaign. And as you know, following the presentations, we will just engage in an interactive discussion with you, Ninda. But first, we wanted to hear your observations, your work on just transition first, before we engage on the global mechanism. So the floor is all yours.
Okay, hi Annabella. Thank you, Annabella. Hi everyone. So Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Linda. I'm a senior strategist for Indonesian Center for Environmental Law. I'm here with my colleagues, Rabin and Safa, who are the researchers from ICEL. Would like to help me, Rabin, perhaps, to share the screen? Yes. Um, yeah. Okay. So before jumping into the issues, just um slide. Yeah. So next. Just an introduction about ICEL. So this one, yes. Okay. So we are an advocacy organization. We are an environmental organization. We've been advocating environmental justice in Indonesia since 3 decades ago. We have three approaches in our work. So we do policy legal reform, we do capacity building, and we do empowerment, CSOs or communities. So we are not only working to enhance at the supply side, not only working to not only assisting the government in building the policy or legal framework, but also we are working to ensure the exercise of rights on the communities. Next. So next. Yeah. So in terms of just transition, for us, just transition, of course, isn't just a buzzwords. So it's really at heart of what we believe Indonesia needs as we move away from fossil fuels. So this is just our recent work. So we are one of the members of Just Transition Working Group under Indonesia's Just Energy Transition Partnerships, JETP. So for those who might not be familiar, JETP is the massive international partnerships that's helping Indonesia transition to clean energy with about $20 billion in funding. But this is why we're so involved in these issues, because we need to make sure that this transition doesn't leave anyone behind. That's where our working group comes in. So we're basically the voice that's saying, hey, what about the workers? What about the communities? We also works on worker just transition for workers. This is huge for us. We've been really vocal about advocating for just transition policies that protect workers in the coal industries. These are real people with real families who've built lives around this job. So we are pushing the policies framework that provide that protecting the rights for the workers itself. And we also pushing the policies about the alternative employment opportunities, and the most important thing is the social safety nets. These are we've developed paper on that, and we also one of the most important work happens right here is where we've been working directly with the local government in the coal dependent region, having real conversations about economic diversification. We know that these aren't easy conversations. So these regions have built their entire communities, their entire economies around coal. So we are sitting down with the local officials, community leaders, and trying to develop the policy towards alternative livelihood. And last but not least, on the international stage, over the past few COPs, those we've been advocating for stronger distribution mechanisms. We've seen some progress, which is great, but we keep pushing because Indonesia voices needs to be heard in this global conversation. So in the next slide, perhaps I will offer to Rabin or Safa to explain more. Go ahead, please. Yes, is it Rabin or Safa for this slide?
Okay, hello. I'm sorry, I have am I audible? Okay, so
Yes.
All is good, Safa. Please go ahead.
so why Indonesia matters in the energy transition. So, as we all know that Indonesia's economy and energy system remain heavily dependent on fossil fuels, especially coal. So, Indonesia is one of the world's largest coal exporters and still relies on coal for the majority of electricity generation. This makes the energy transition a climate necessity, but also a profound socio-economic challenge in Indonesia. So in Indonesia, the coal revenues remain a major contributor to the state income, accounting for roughly 75% of the mineral royalty revenues. Therefore, for Indonesia, moving away from coal directly affects workers, local economies, and also the public finance. So it's not only about the transition, but also the socio-economic challenge. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. So here are a few governance and policy challenges to a just transition that we have managed to identify in Indonesia. First, we notice that there is no legally binding national definition or framework for just transition in Indonesia. Currently, so far, up till now, the mentioning of just transition exists only in ministerial policies, ministerial level regulation without clear indicators or enforceable obligations regarding the just transition. Second, subnational government face major policy and knowledge gaps. So our studies show that have been mentioned by Ninda before, that our studies show most regions still depend on extractive industries with very limited plans to actually diversify away from coal. We did a recent baseline study on the strategic environmental assessment, or in Indonesia we call it KLHS, a regional medium-term development plan on one of the most coal-dependent dependent region, which is East Kalimantan in Indonesia. And we found out that only 2 out of 10 regencies in East Kalimantan stated that they need to transition away from fossil fuel and reduce their revenue dependence on coal. But of these 2 regencies, both state that their transition strategy will be optimized by palm oil instead. So basically, it's just like shifting to another extractive industry. Third challenge that we are facing is that in Indonesia, the civic space is shrinking. Between 2014 and 2023, it is known that at least 133 SLAP cases targeted environmental defenders, limiting community participation in transition process. Okay, next.
Yeah, thanks, Safa. So, as Ninda mentioned before, we also work on the workers' transition, especially on the coal power plants workers' transitions. And this is one of our colleagues, Fred, and Bandung Legal Aid Foundation. Bandung is a city in the West Java. They come up with a research. They wrote a research regarding workers' transition in 3 coal power plants. Then they found 3 primary issues categories. The first one, of course, many research institutions or NGOs have conclude this stuff before, the protection of rights for workers affected by the coal power plants, and also the second, the enhancement of infrastructure or legal instruments to safeguard workers during coal power plants retirement, and then the provision of alternative job opportunities, including capacity building and skill transfer initiative. And then, like Ninda mentioned before, we not only work with the demanding of justice, but we also want to bring those issues to the supplier of justice. That is, in this context, is the regulator, that is the Ministry of Manpower or Ministry of Labor. We held bilateral audience meeting with the workers' union of the SOE Electricity Utility, or PLN, and then also high-level meeting with Ministry of Manpower to deliver the analysis or regarding the workers' transitions, and also regarding the our other work regarding the just transitions. We also this is a new program that we are starting this year. We want to look at the advocacy on high integrity carbon because Indonesian government has positioned carbon markets as a key pillar of its climate and development strategy. Estimating carbon credits in the forestry and land use sector could be worth between up to $8.6 billion annually. And then while forestry carbon trading potentially could generate over 258 trillion rupiah, Indonesian rupiah per year. So they put that in as a primary effort as a 2030 targets and transition to a net zero economy. And then that's why Indonesia needs stronger national standard to ensure fair and transparent benefit sharing with IPLC around carbon projects. And also high integrity carbon standards are essential, we believe, to ensure that benefits from carbon markets are fairly shared with indigenous peoples and local communities who protect and manage forest landscapes. And the expected results, the way we do our work is that we again work with the people and civil society, and then we convening of around 15 IPLC's member engaged in the jurisdictional RED+ program on RED+ mechanism, community rights, and equitable benefit sharing process. And also we want to deliver this field research highlighting improved forest governance, right holder protection, and fair benefit sharing mechanism to the Ministry of Environment as national focal point. And I think the work on JETP has been mainly with Saffanah. She's been doing an amazing job regarding the JETP process and on the working group on just transition in JETP. Saffanah.
So I would like to give like an overview of our observation, particularly on JETP. As my colleague Rabin has mentioned before, that we are that ICEL is part of the working group, the Just Transition Working Group on JETP Secretariat. So now turning to Indonesia's Just Energy Transition Partnership, or publicly known as JETP. So JETP was launched in 2022 during the G20 in Bali with a $20 billion financing commitment. The aim of JETP itself is to accelerate renewable energy deployment and enable earlier picking of emissions. There are, of course, the positive aspects of the JETP. First, it elevated the international attention and create a platform for policy dialogue. And also we have now we have the comprehensive investment and policy plan that provides some directions, even though it is not legally binding. So we do actually have the Just Transition Standards in the CIPP, the Comprehensive Investment and Policy Plan document, but however, it is non-legally binding in Indonesia. So we also identify several key gaps of the JETP process. First off is the leadership shift and political transition that have slowed momentum, as it is already spread in the news that the leadership in the JETP Secretariat is shifting from the Japan to the Germany, and it will start with the Germany leadership this year. And also the failure of the Cirebon 1 early retirement coal-fired power plants pilot project that has raised concerns about the feasibility. So ultimately, the CFPP called Cirebon 1 was supposed to be early retirement as the pilot project of JETP. However, this project has been cancelled due to several concerns, mainly about the feasibility and about the finance. Then we have in the JETP there has been a narrative shift from early retirement of coal plants toward repurposing, the terminology repurposing, which raised question about whether emission reductions will be as ambitious as initially promised. Fourth, about the significant portion of financing is loans, not grants. So it has raised several concerns, particularly about the long-term fiscal burden for Indonesia, and also civil society and community engagement has been really limited and inconsistent during the JETP in Indonesia. So ICEL is one of the CSOs, one of the only like 3 CSOs that is included in the JETP process, has been like a bridge between the civil society and the JETP secretariat. And most importantly, we have come to acknowledge that the translation of just principles in the just transition framework in the just transition in JETP itself remains incomplete. The framework does not clearly incorporate restorative justice, and it does not establish like an accessible grievance mechanism for the affected communities. So justice remains more rhetorical than operational in the JETP process. Next slide, please. Okay, so if we look at the project implementation, the complexity of the key gaps I have mentioned before becomes clearer. This is one of the project in JETP, which is the Saguling Floating Solar Power Plant, a 92 megawatt renewable project linked to JETP. While it is framed as renewable energy progress, the local communities have persisted with the project. So the farmers and fish cultivators fear losing their livelihoods due to this project, because it is known that there are like several uncertainty around the compensations, and also the local people are concerned about the existing impacts on the culturally significant sites near this project. Okay, next. Oh, this is not a JETP project, but it is mentioned as like the baseline study, the case study in the JETP progress report. So similarly, the Tolo wind power plant is presented in official reports as a model case that complies with just transition standards under the JETP framework, claiming its alignment with the standards 1 till 8. So, however, independent field findings suggest a different story. So some community members report that they are actually being pressured to sell land below the market value. So brokers allegedly promised jobs and improved electricity access, and residents who resist reportedly experience intimidation, including like police presence. So this raises a critical concern for us. If a project is officially assessed as compliant, yet in the realities on the ground show otherwise, it suggests a serious gaps in monitoring and evaluation. So without the robust M&E mechanisms, compliance assessment risk becoming procedural checklists rather than substantive safeguards. This is what we know from the JETP process. These 2 examples show that renewable energy alone does not guarantee justice as what we hope for the JETP process. Okay, next. Oh, also for the JETP projects, it is important for us to actually examine how JETP projects actually impact communities at the ground level, not only how they are being reported in the official documents. So, next slide, please. Here we have our ongoing proposed just transition mechanism. Note that we are still on the making of the proposal, but we have like these 3 main pillars of our just transition mechanism that can actually support our work in just transition, in advancing just transition in Indonesia. So the mechanism is designed around 3 interconnected components. First off is a steering body, an inclusion knowledge accountability arm, and also the implementation and resource arm. I would like to explain this briefly. The steering body should function as the primary decision-making organ of the mechanism. Its composition must reflect balanced representative between developed and developing countries, Annex 1 and Annex 2, in line with equity and CBDRC. features a permanent inclusion advisory group to ensure that representation for groups not fully covered by constituencies, such as like person with disabilities, migrants, and the elderly. Also, we have the institutional coordinations. We hope that with the steering bodies, they can maintain a formal mandate to coordinate with co-presidencies, Sebasta, and SBI, ensuring the JTM is integrated into the broader UNFCCC process. And for the global cooperation, we hope that this steering body can facilitate high-level partnership with the ILO, UNDP, and UNCTAD, UNCTAD, while endorsing thematic events hosted by parties to showcase transition progress. And also the accountability to ensure process transparency. Now turning to the inclusion, knowledge, and accountability arm, we believe that just transition cannot be implemented without transparency and evidence-based learning. So this arm would strengthen, enhance reporting and transparency arrangement that support monitoring and evaluation of just transition efforts while remaining facilitative and non-punitive. It will also develop non-prescriptive knowledge products informed by the JTWP dialogues and research, and these parties in integrating just transition into NDCs, NAPs, and national development planning and national climate regulation without imposing uniform standards. So finally, we propose the design of a politically mandated stock-taking process. And lastly, implementation and resource arm. In this arm, we ensure that the JTWP moves beyond dialogue and deliver concrete different support, particularly for developing countries. Therefore, this arm would first encourage and track the delivery of MOI, means of implementation, by developed countries, including finance, technology transfer, and capacity building, in line with the CBDRRC principle. And also, we believe that the tracking delivery is critical because without the structured follow-up, commitment risk remains aspirational only. Second, the mechanism will provide matchmaking support between available resources and the parties' needs, particularly for the Global South. Many developing countries have transition needs but lack technical capacity to prepare bankable projects or navigate the fragmented financial architecture like we see in Indonesia. So this mechanism could serve as a coordination and facilitation platform, connecting project pipelines to funding windows such as the Green Climate Fund, GEF, or MDB channels, while still prioritizing brain-based concessional support to avoid increasing debt burdens. Third, it would facilitate and coordinate partnership, including voluntary initiatives such as the JETP, both inside and outside the COP process. So additionally, this arm should provide technical assistance for nationally determined just transition roadmaps that align with NDCs and LT elites, while respecting national circumstances and avoiding a one size fits all no one size fits all approach. What we are presenting today is still a working proposal. It is not finalized yet, the institutional design, but rather like a contribution to the ongoing discussion of how a just transition mechanism or the BELM action mechanism could be structured. Okay, next. Yeah, so our proposal is similar to BAM, and also this is why we feel that a global mechanism matters in terms of our work here in Indonesia. So from Indonesia's experience, a global just transition mechanism could actually play a critical role. So first, it could provide a normative clarity where the clear minimum standards on labor protection, community participation, gender equality, and rights safeguards. Second, it could also create accountability structures like transparent reporting, independent review, public access to informations, and most importantly, about the grievance mechanism that communities can actually use. Thirdly, it could provide structured support As I've mentioned before regarding the MOI, the technical assistance for social protection design, capacity building for subnational government, and South-South learning platforms. And lastly, for the making and mobilizing finance, such as in like Indonesia, we are currently lacking the financial support to actually do and advance just transition in Indonesia. So this mechanism could really help with that. Okay, next slide. Then this presentation will come to an end. That is all from us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Saffanah, Rabin, for this presentation. Really, we really appreciate and are very grateful for you also bringing some of the concrete experiences of some of these projects on the ground. I would also like to welcome Felicitus as well to the panel. So the way in which we are going to proceed now is just with a couple of questions, I guess, from our groups based on what you just shared. One of them, and we appreciate also you reflecting on what a mechanism could do, a global mechanism could do. I wonder if you could share also with us a little bit your thoughts on how an institution like yours that is doing work in Indonesia on just transition, how do you see your role in such a global mechanism? And also your thoughts on how communities could potentially connect to this global mechanism, which is not an easy thing when you were sharing also about the challenges that those communities on the ground are facing, but also your bridging role in terms of the JETP work. Like when you think about a global mechanism, any thoughts or inputs on how those voices can also find somehow their place? I mean, I think it would be really helpful for us. I would also like to ask Hajar or Felicitus if they had a specific question at this stage. So we ask for a couple, and then Ninda, Safa, and Rabin can answer. Hajar.
Thank you so much, both of you. This is really insightful. I got a couple of questions, but I'll just share first two questions, and if we still have time by the end, maybe I'll come again. The first thing, thank you so much for proposing, for sharing your proposal around just transition mechanism. It's really close to what Cross Constituency has also proposed, but my question here is, from Global South perspective, but specifically from Indonesia perspective, how do you envision civil society and youth participation within this mechanism, both inside the working program or on the ground on your national level? This is my first question. And my second question is around the first piece you presented on, let me get the right name, because I took note of that, on the carbon, where was it? Sorry.
High integrity
carbon. Yeah.
Yes. How would you balance that this does not encourage government to like sell more carbon emissions, because in Angry we also fight lots of carbon credits and those full solutions. So if you can share more from your national perspective, thank you so much.
Thank you, Hajar. I will pass to Felicitus for a final question, and then we come back to you, folks. Felicitus.
Hi. My first question was what the mechanism looks like, and another curious body the inclusion,
Felicitus, I'm struggling to hear you. I don't know if that's the case for everyone. Is there anything we can do sound-wise?
Can you hear me better? Can you hear
Much better.
Yes. So I was saying that under what the just transition mechanism could look like, there was inclusive representation and accountability, and then moving down to the knowledge arm, there was also an element of inclusion and accountability. So I was thinking that is there a way that you're thinking of framing this in a different way, that it wouldn't look like the same thing, because from your explanation, it didn't, there was that similarity, but how can we ensure that these are part of the structures of the mechanism, not necessarily things that are not necessarily like, let me call them checkboxes for now, even though that is not the right word I would be using for it. How do you think that we could have these things as part of the structural, as part of the structure of the mechanism? And also, my second question is on implementation. And I wanted to ask, do you foresee financing the mechanism as a partnership thing? Because that came out very, very strongly on facilitating and coordinating partnerships and matchmaking. And how do we ensure equity within your proposals? How do we ensure that countries that actually require funding for transitioning do get funding for the transitions that they need?
Thank you, Felicitas. And just to name that, as you know, us in civil society, we are also trying to figure out these questions. So by no means feel like you need to have all the answers. This is just a collective exercise for bringing our sharing, our intelligence together. So Ninda, Safa, Rabin, over to you with all these questions.
Okay, so thank you so much for the enthusiasm for our presentation. So I'll try to we'll try to answer your questions. So for how we can benefit or with the global mechanism, how global mechanism can help our work, and what's our role as civil society in Indonesia for it. We feel like a global mechanism can help to ensure that just transition process are not like externally imposed or like financed different, but genuinely grounded in the local realities. So I would like to just explain a little bit about how our role, particularly my organization in the global mechanism. First, we feel like we can, with our presence, with our organization presence, can strengthen local ownership by requiring that transition plans are nationally determined and developed through inclusive and participatory process, rather than designed solely by external financial actors. Secondly, we can promote context-sensitive implementation because we also do like studies on the ground, as I've mentioned by my colleagues before. So we can use those lessons learned by embedding flexibility within its framework. So like we believe that the global mechanism shall not prescribe as a one size fits all pathway, but instead just provide guidance, and then we will translate it relevant to the context in Indonesia. Because as I have mentioned before, Indonesia is an archipelagic nations that have different socioeconomic backgrounds within the province. So we can help to translate how the just transition mechanism to national and through each province. And also thirdly, we can institutional continuous feedback from affected communities. We have friends in the pressured communities. So by creating structured participation platforms, grievance channels, and reporting mechanism, the global mechanism can ensure that the lived experience of workers, indigenous people, and local communities inform policy adjustment over time. Yeah, I think that's all that I can. Yeah. Next to Rabin, maybe you can answer.
Yeah, thank you so much. So for the second question first, regarding the carbon project, high integrity carbon project in the forestry sector. This program, we focus on the benefit sharing mechanism and then the forest governance. And the way we work in ICEL is that we also have another work regarding carbon emissions in the industrial sector. So we hope that we are not only working towards the create some stringency in the forestry sector regarding the high integrity carbon standards, but we want to work. We also want to push the regulations in the industrial sector so that they won't incentivize to emit more emissions, knowing that they have these emissions. Sorry, they have this high integrity credit standards in forestry sector, because for example, we have done this work regarding the steel industry, that we look at the environmental regulations. We look at the command and control instruments. We also look at the Indonesian market instruments that can create some stringency in the industrial steel industry sectors, to push those or to create those stringency in those industry sector. So we hope the both of our works can kind of balance and not incentivizing the industrial sector to emit more. So yeah, we push for both in both sectors. And for the first question regarding how do we envision civil society and youth in this mechanism, I think in Indonesia we have these climate justice coalitions in Indonesia that we also part of the steering committee. It comprises of 36 plus NGOs that we're pushing for the climate justice bill. And in that coalition, we push for the youth representatives. We work with the some of the universities. We work with the youth NGOs. We want, and also in the recent development in the coalitions, we mainstreaming these participations. Especially, we one of the youth NGO is joining as one of the steering committees. So we still want to push this participation. And regarding to this mechanism, I think this type of inclusion can be included as well on the national level. For example, if we, I think Safa mentioned before, in the inclusion advisory or sort of something like that, inclusion advisory body, or maybe in the national level, we want to push for the youth participations, so that they can also be participated in the national level regarding this mechanism. I think that's all I can think of from as of right now. Maybe Safa and Aninda want to
Maybe I
add
would
something.
maybe I would like to add on. I'm sorry if I misheard about the question that Felicitas asked, but I'll try to answer the question. It is about the how to differentiate the accountability from the steering body and implementation and resource. If I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong. So so from in our proposal, we see that this have both different accountability, where in the steering body there's like the political and strategic accountability, where the steering body should be responsible for setting overall principles and safeguards, also reviewing high level progress reports and identifying systemic gaps and escalating issues to the COP. So in a way you can say that the steering body's function is to oversight, not like day-to-day implementation control. So the steering body is more like, are we like on track politically and normatively with the JTWP? Meanwhile, the implementation and resource arms mainly responsible for like tracking delivery of finance and technical support, managing the matchmaking process, and also reporting on implementation performance to ensure like the safeguards are embedded in supported projects. So more like how are we delivering this? Is this being delivered as agreed, and how effectively? I think that's one of our strategies, so that the accountability function does not overlap between those two bodies. But we would like to also clarify that we are still working on like the reporting lines and also like the connection between each arms. As I have mentioned before, that our proposal is still a working document and we're still working on it. And also I would like to add on like the Annabella question is that the global just mechanism could also help Indonesia, because as I've mentioned before, in Indonesia, even the terminology of the just transition is only mentioned in like ministerial level. We haven't like have the indicators or like standards that are legally binding in Indonesia. So we really hope that the standards and how to operationalize just transition in the that is embedded in the global mechanism could be strength to the national climate policies here in Indonesia. Maybe Ninda want to add?
Not really, but I would like to underline that the critical gaps between the international commitments and grassroots implementations. I can say that there are three critical disconnects. Firstly, I oversee that language and conceptual barriers where international frameworks mainly use technical terminology that doesn't resonate with local communities somehow. Secondly, is about the scale misalignment. So most of the time that global policies, global commitments often lack specificity for local economic and social contexts, and also the power asymmetries, right? How the communities have limited influence on how these international commitments are interpreted and implemented nationally. So I think how as CSOs movement can address these three critical disconnects jointly becomes very important. Yes, from us. Tanya.
Thanks so much, friends, and thank you so much for all your thoughts and inputs. I think you raised several aspects that I think converge a lot with our thinking, but you put a lot of your local realities into it. I'm particularly inclined to highlight a couple, but this is not a good summary for this hearing. People can access the full recording, but just a couple of things that struck me in terms of some of the challenges you raised. Of course, there are elements that relate to the translation between national to subnational and from subnational to local, to which we can also add the international elements and all these issues that you were referring to, Ninda, in terms of power asymmetries that reflect throughout, that chain of connections and levels, but also deeper challenges that go in the sense of the difficult shifts in terms of economic structure of the country, like with a basically little alternative or a shift between one kind of extraction to another kind of extraction happening there. Elements related to the JETP process, including the kind of financing and the limits on the kind of financing, notably loans and the burden it could place also on public finances in terms of the debt structure they imply. And there are also limits there in terms of engagement with civil society and communities. And I think a third one that I didn't hear that often, which is the instability, I would say, that the JETP process faced because of its very limited nature, in terms of who decides on what. So there is a political instability somehow associated with the decision making that also puts a question mark on the viability of this process in the long run, which is also one that we need to capture, because these just transition processes are long in nature. So what does it mean to have it so tightly connected to the ups and downs of donor country politics, I would say, which is certainly an issue. And then all your proposals in terms of the mechanism and what it could do, I think we are all going to study. Many of them, aligned a lot to what we've been saying. I think it's interesting to hear about this grievance aspect that I think probably we can dig a bit further. But in any case, we wanted all to thank you for this time with us. We are certainly going to go back to you. If there is written information that you want to share with us that we can also make available for all our constituencies and groups, you are more than welcome. We are now being joined by Lauren, that is going to be part of the next public hearing. Welcome, Lauren. But we wanted to thank you so much, Ninda, Safa, Rabin, for your time. And we, thank you so much. For people that are following in the live stream, this stream will cut for a moment for you in YouTube. Well, we have 7 minutes to prepare for the next one, and you can just refresh your YouTube page, and you are going to have the next one live. So for the ones in Zoom, you just stay here, and we are going to keep with the preparation. So thank you, everyone, and thanks again to the ICEL team.